Thank you. Thank you all very much. Clancy's now in charge of running the rostrum again. Reverend Pond, Justice Saylor, Judge Stevens, Mr. Chief Clerk. I remember the first time I was on the floor of this House. I was 7 years old. I was seated over here because my dad had been elected in a special election on February 19th, 1963. Was sworn in over here. The family was down here. We later sat up in the balcony in the lower left-hand portion there. The highlight of my day, though, was that I had just had one of those little kind of buzzer vibrator things I got at Christmas that when you shook somebody's hand, it would kind of send a little shock jolt through someone's hand. And the family came to town, and I announced to my mom and dad that when I met the governor that day, I was going to shake his hand with that. My mother took that away from me shortly after that. But clearly, those first memories of being in this hall of the House are probably no different than everyone else here as you look around in awe the first time you're in this room. It is indeed a special place. And I guess it gives me a little deeper roots as a part of the family of this House. And each of you today that are here with a loved one who was elected, especially for the first time, to the spouses and the kids, know that you are also a part of this family, and in some way you are part of each representative that sits here and a reflection of that. As we gather here to commence this session, I'm pleased to recognize several honored guests that we have with us. Governor-elect Tom Corbett, and along with the governor is Ann Marie Kaiser. I don't know if Anne Marie wanted me to identify her as she'll be many of you know she'll be the legislative liaison type person for the governor, so she's got a target on her back anyhow. Treasurer Rob McCord, thank you for being here. Auditor General Jack Wagner, thank you. My Congressman Glenn G.T. Thompson, thank you for being here. Did the Chief, Don White, make it over here? Senator Don White? Well, I know they're getting sworn in over there too, but he was going to try to make it. Former House member and a friend of mine, we shared office at one time in his place. He's the current Bucks County DA, Dave Heckler. Welcome back, Dave. The guy here is a county councilman from Delaware County. He was around this place for a few years, didn't make much of a mark, kind of was low-key, didn't have a lot to say, but he's a special friend of mine, Mario Severa. Mario. Did you bring any hoagies with you today, Mario? Former Speaker and friend Bob O'Donnell and his wife, Donna Gentile. And while they're not specifically guests of mine, in the sense of this institution and the significance of each year, the building blocks of each year, I do want to recognize former Speaker Bill DeWeese and former Speaker Denny O'Brien as they sit among us, earning their seat back in this legislative body. Couple of special guests, Governor George Leader, John McNally, and Sil Lukowity. Would you gentlemen please rise for a minute? These guys are special because they helped to create the first ever legislative swearing-in committee, which was modeled after a gubernatorial inaugural committee. And I just appreciate their willingness and effort, their time to help organize this, to help us maintain some of the the traditions and the celebratory nature of this while being mindful of the impact on taxpayers that these affairs do cost. And we want to do this in a bipartisan manner, and it's something I hope that we will be able to build on going further. So thank you, gentlemen, for your special contribution to this swearing-in day, and of course, Governor Leader, to your long-standing contribution to this Commonwealth as a governor and leader within this great state. Thank you all. God bless you. While I have many other personal friends and supporters that are here, I did want to mention two specifically because they've been with me from my very first campaign. Diane Keel and her husband Bill, and Bob Roberts and his wife Karen. Diane and Bob have been my campaign manager, campaign treasurer for all these years, and you know what that's like. They put up with the headaches and grief. So to you two, thank you very much for being here today. To those people that are most important in my life, my mother, Jean Huey Smith, she does best what mothers do, kind of fuss and fret over their babies. And so I thank, I'm glad that you were able to be here. To my father, who was introduced, L. Eugene Snuffy Smith, who once, when I was first elected to a leadership position, someone back home said, well, what's it feel like to have gone farther in the legislature than your father did? I responded with, farther, I'm standing on his shoulders, because I was fortunate enough to succeed my dad in this job, and I had the benefit of his years of experience, his wisdom. He knew the people, he knew the issues, and he was a constant, and still to this day, a constant support in all that I do as a state legislator and as an individual. So I'm really extra specially proud, because you know what it's like in this building, the good days and the bad, and I'm thankful that you're here, Dad, as well. My daughter, Alexandra, who just graduated from Grove City College, and my son, Zachary, who's a junior at IUP. I'm proud of you guys. They think this is pretty cool. I'm totally intimidated. And saving the best for last, my wife, Donna, who's put up with me for over 25 years. And for those of you that know me well, know that I have a few quirks and eccentricities in the way I go about certain things. Donna puts up with it. She was never one, she didn't really like the idea of being married to someone who was planning to run for public office. We made a deal that we'd do this or that. If I won, and I would continue. If I lost, I'd go a different direction. Today, she's probably the more political one in the family, and everywhere we go, she knows everybody when we leave. She knows how many kids you have and their names and who's sick and who's whatever in your family. So to my wife, thank you very much for your support and love. None of us do this job alone. And to my staff, to my friends here and back home and around the Commonwealth, and to my family, I just want to thank you for your faith, your love, and your friendship. Today, as we begin our work as Pennsylvanians, as the legislative branch of government, as the House of Representatives, there's some things that we need to think about. And I would ask you to think about this first, regardless of your religious domination, your religious background, your spiritual beliefs. I ask that you think about the meaning of the passage that I asked Reverend Pond to read as part of the opening prayer today. It was a letter from Paul to the Corinthians, which was a fledgling church at that time. And he was explaining to the new church that it's made up of many parts, and that the body cannot function, survive, or grow unless each of the parts recognizes what their role was within the church. Some in the church were too full of pride, and others didn't see really what their role or value was. Well, the same can be true of this house. So without relationship to a specific religion, I think these words and this concept are important for us, maybe more important in this day and time that we're facing. Each of us has a role, none more important than the other. As we gather here in front of the apotheosis of Pennsylvania, which in many respects is a reflection of many of the former parts of the body of Pennsylvania, a review of history tells us that there were many famous members of this House. Citizens like Thomas Mifflin, the first governor of Pennsylvania, aide-de-camp to General Washington, and a signer of the U.S. Constitution, a member of this House. James Buchanan, who went on to be President of the United States, a member of this House. And of course, Benjamin Franklin, along with many others. Their roles as a part of the body of Pennsylvania and this legislature are storied and significant. That same review of history also reveals that there were hundreds of others, of which their names on the roll call are known only to their families. Yet each played their part, each cast their votes, and each had an influence on governing this Commonwealth. From giants of history to one-term semi-anonymous members, they were all part of this body. A few minutes ago, 200 of us were sworn in, each of us with one vote. As a part of this House today, 29 members, or 14% of our body, is sitting here for the first time. And just as a side note, while I thank the kind members who did the nomination speeches, part of me had said, you better not really believe everything they said, because you can get your feet off the ground and think you're more important than what each of us are. So to the new members, I would give you one piece of advice today, and that's don't read your own news releases. Keep your feet on the ground and be mindful of why you wanted to be here and why the voters elected you. 29 new members. Our body is also comprised of 29 members who are beginning their second term. Among us, there are members in their 20s who bring the enthusiasm and hope of youth, and members who are in their 80s who bring institutional memory and experiences of life. Most of the leadership positions, including mine, are held by people new to that particular position, yet each with the energy a new start brings and respect for the challenge ahead. The same is true with the chairman of the committees. Some will resume their many years of work, and others will be facing something altogether new. All of the parts, ears or eyes, hands or feet, heart or lungs, have their role to play, each important, each depending on others doing their part. If we're going to do a good job in the next 2 years, we all need to fulfill our respective roles. And to begin today, I think we should examine our fears, our hopes, our goals, and our dreams. Too often we see the issues from one of two points of view, as if there were only two views in this hall. The truth is there are 203 points of view. We're not a body of just Republicans and Democrats. We are a reflection of the 12.5 million Pennsylvanians, each who is an equal part of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Our founding fathers understood the complete political spectrum from a world perspective, not the spectrum limited to the range of conservative right or liberal left, but a spectrum that ranged from something known as ruler's law, that of kings and emperors on one end of the spectrum, to that of no law on the other end of the spectrum. It was a spectrum that ranged from tyranny to anarchy. Thomas Jefferson wrote, "We are now vibrating between too much and too little government, and the pendulum will rest finally in the middle." And that is, in fact, what our founding fathers designed and sought for, a balance between the tyranny of ruler's law and the anarchy of no law. He and the other founders of our country went on to seek a government that was based on this middle of the political spectrum, one based on the people. They founded what would be called the People's Law, based on the government of ancient Israel, that of Moses at Mount Sinai, and that framework was refined by people like Washington, Jefferson, Madison, and yes, our own Ben Franklin. Jefferson had studied ruler's law and described it as a state of 100% government control, where coercive power and systematic control is maintained over the people. Power is concentrated, people are subjects, and the country is the property of the ruler. As scary as anarchy is, our founders believed that ruler's law was the greatest enemy of the people. In the writings of George Washington, he described the basic human struggle as, quote, "There is a natural and necessary progression from the extreme of anarchy to the extreme of tyranny." So as we go about our work, my fear is that we find ourselves returning to ruler's law, and it is imperative that we guard against this natural progression toward the extreme of tyranny that Washington wrote about. My hope is, with the knives of November restored to their sheaths, that we may set aside the hyperbole of the elections as we debate the issues of the day. Our success in governing this Commonwealth is dependent upon a debate that is singular and clear. My goal is that we defeat the drift toward tyranny by applying the wisdom of Adam Smith, who developed the notion that, quote, "Wealth is not gold or silver, but the essentials of life. And if you want an increased standard of living and prosperity, goods and services should be abundant and cheap." My dream is that we share these fears and hopes and goals, that each of us, from first-term members to the most senior, from backbenchers to floor leaders, from the East or the West, from the cities or the country, that each of us carries out our duties, lives up to our responsibility, and executes our authority as citizens of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, as part of the General Assembly, and as members of the House of Representatives. Our own Ben Franklin once declared, "Only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. As nations become corrupt and vicious, they have more need of masters." In closing, I want to tell you a story about a guy named Charles Plumb. He was a U.S. Navy pilot in Vietnam, flew 75 combat missions, was shot down, parachuted into the enemy hands, and after 6 years in a POW camp, he was rescued and survived. He went on to do lectures, and one day he was sitting at a restaurant with his wife, and a stranger came up to him, and the man said to him, "You're Plumb. You flew fighter jets from the aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk. You were shot down." Plumb asked him, "How in the world did you know that?" The man replied, "I packed your parachute." Plumb gasped in surprise and gratitude, and the man pumped his hand in the air and said, "I guess it worked." Plumb responded, "It sure did. If it hadn't, I wouldn't be here today." Charles Plumb couldn't sleep that night thinking about this man. What did he look like in his uniform? Did I ever see him on board the ship? Did I meet him? Did I say hello? After all, he was a flyer. He flew fighter jets. This guy was just a sailor. No disrespect, Pastor. He was just a sailor. How did I treat this guy? He thought about this guy working in the bowels of the ship at this long wooden table, weaving the shrouds and folding the silks of each parachute. Today, Charles Plumb asks his audience, "Who is folding your chute?" Today, I would ask you, who is folding your chute? Who are the many other parts of your life that make you what you are? Each an important part of the whole. The physical chute, the mental chute, the emotional chute, the spiritual chute. Over the next couple of hours, the next couple of weeks, the next 2 years, pay attention to those around you and around each of us who fold our chutes, each part as important as the other to make the whole body work. May each of us carry out our role in a virtuous manner with strength, wisdom, courage, and patience. And may God bless the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and God bless this House. Thank you. Thank you.